Welcome to the Beyond Divorce, Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Well, welcome everyone to Beyond Divorce, Embracing Change. I am so honored to have a special guest here for you. This is Miss Karen McNenny. She is a wonderful person I've got to speak with, and she is part of the Good Divorce Show, which is her podcast. And she has decided to join our show to give us some insight and to give you some insight on some ways that you can go through the divorce process. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners. Thank you.
Oh, we can't wait. And tell us where you're located, Karen. Do you mind?
I'm in Western Montana, in specifically Missoula, Montana, which happens to be the town I grew up in that I could not get out of fast enough. So I broke out, traveled, saw a bit of the world, came back home and realized I grew up in a really wonderful, fabulous place. So I have been here raising my family and enjoying the great outdoors of the Rocky Mountain West.
Wow. It is so beautiful. I've visited before, and it is just a beautiful state. I am in complete agreement with you how beautiful it is, and majestic is probably the word I would use to describe that.
We're trying to keep it a little bit on the wraps here, right?
You do get a lot of people moving there, yes.
We do. Well, I think our entire state population is right around 1 million people, like only 1 million in the entire state, which is the fourth largest state in the country.
Wow.
So we got lots of space to share.
Lots of space to share. Visit. Lots of space to visit.
Right.
Visit. Don't stay. Visit. That's fun. Well, Karen, tell me what got you into this work when you made the decision to say, hey, I want to help families, especially families of divorce. Tell me what got you passionate about that.
Well, the pivot point was the pandemic, but the genesis moment was about 15 years ago when I was facing my own divorce with my husband. And we arrived at that threshold, like many families, wondering, oh my gosh, first of all, we don't want this to be our story. Nobody does. Our children were just 5 and 6 years old at the time, so they were just littles. And it became really apparent that we were going to have a better experience raising our children. And as you say, being the best version of ourselves if we lived across 2 homes. And so Michael and I really set out, my husband, Michael, to create an experience kind of outside of the framework of family law and lawyers and litigation. We wanted to be one family that lived across 2 homes, and that's how we always have referred to ourselves. So we, navigated our journey through a good enough divorce. Our children, that 6 and 7-year-old, now are 19 and 20.
Wow.
And we have gone from kindergarten to college, finding a pathway that is less destructive and with less despair. And we really have had a good enough divorce. And I've been passionate about the topic, have written personal essays and journaling, but it wasn't until the pandemic, because in the other hat that I wear as a business consultant is work I've been doing for 25 years and really an expertise in what I call the invisible parts of the workplace. It's leadership development and employee engagement, workplace culture. It's all the human relationship stuff, right? Those things we can kind of smell and touch, but we can't always put our finger on what is it about this place. So
Right.
I was speaking at national conferences and running retreats and doing on-site training. And when that pandemic arrived, all of that came to a close.
Wow.
And quiet hours of all of us late night Googling, searching what's going to be the next thing. Will our world return? I had a family approach me and ask if I would guide them through their separation process, how to talk to the kids, how to get into two homes. I had done leadership coaching with the father in that family, and I found my way to my calling. I loved that work. I saw that I did have something to say about it. And I thought, well, maybe I should do this with greater intention. I already trained as a therapist in grad school. I did that work in London. So I don't hold that licensure here in the United States and work under that umbrella, but it certainly influences what I do. I had become a certified mediator for my corporate clients when I was helping them with real hot spots. I wanted to make sure that I had the skills to facilitate. So the next natural step was to become a certified divorce coach, which I did as we were coming out of the pandemic. And I realized I didn't even know that was a thing, which I think is so common that, just like Michael and I, we were handed one choice on the multiple choice of how to get divorced. Call a lawyer and then go for the dumpster fire, become enemies. It's a land grab. There's going to be scarcity, and your children are probably going to be, mentally devastated in the process. I thought, there's just got to be another way. So coming out of my own training and wanting to work with families, I could just see there is a path if we would educate and train and support families where we don't start with the legal part. We start with the family part, family before finances.
Yeah. What's the alternative to the type of divorce people are used to?
Well, in the good divorce experience, the first thing that's different is I work with I work with couples who don't have children,
Right.
but more often than not, those that do have children. We've got a few more dynamics there. And, I tell those families, your marriage is ending, not your relationship. We are going to renovate your relationship because you have a journey that stretches from kindergarten to college, to graduations, to grandbabies, to funerals and weddings. And I certainly don't want any of those children of divorce trying to deal with your drama, mom and dad, or mom's dads on that wedding day. We
Right.
can do better. So bringing both of those parents together, both individuals in the couple, so that they sit side by side in their journey. That's the first difference. Not let's immediately decide we're going to be enemies. And I'd remind people, divorce is not a weapon. It's a tool. It's a tool that we can use to actually improve the function of the family by way of renovating that primary relationship between the parents. I don't know why we would set out to spend tens of thousands of dollars to make a bad thing worse. If you want your bad marriage to get worse, stay in your bad marriage. It will get worse. If you want it to get really bad, hire two litigating lawyers to set up enemy lines and keep you entangled in conflict, and sometimes even adding to the conflict. And
Right.
I'm not dissing on lawyers. Lawyers are trained to do exactly what they're doing, which is to advocate and fight for their singular client in a system that is set up for an adversarial fight.
Right.
So part of my goal as an advocate of the good divorce is to reclaim the divorce experience and let people find a pathway that is more about education and skill building, not just dividing assets. Those lawyers are going to get you divorced. They're not going to do anything to help you to be a better, high-functioning family and co-parents, which is the long tail of the divorce story.
100%. I have a question then. Can you tell us about an adversarial family you worked with, parents that you worked with that were able to navigate their way through it and actually create a good divorce? Can you give us a story on that?
Well, sure. And I guess what I would say, first of all, is not every client is my client. And, the best moment for me to wrap my arms around a family is on a Sunday, they decide, oh, okay, that's it. We're throwing in the towel. We've done the couples counseling. We've done our individual. We went to the retreat. We had the intervention. We've had date nights. And I am pro family. I would have given anything to raise my children in one home with their dear father, who I absolutely adore as their father. He's an extraordinary human. We just the alchemy, and I think that's what happens, shifted. So you have to begin with a couple who's willing to sit on the same side of the table.
Mhm.
Those are the people who come to me. Those who honestly have stayed too long, if
Yep.
you're already in a situation where you can't talk with your co-parent, that you want to see destruction and hurt and devastation, you probably stayed in that marriage too long. Your expiration date already went by. But so often we don't give ourselves permission for an elegant exit, right? We don't have a narrative for that. And for those of us, the normal neurotics like Michael and I, who we don't have a lot to fight over and we don't want to destroy each other. We just need to get unmarried.
Right.
Those folks are the ideal clients who still come with a lot of pain and come with trouble, and it's a grief process. We need to not underestimate the grief experience and the relationship rupture happening with someone that, you know, you had a love story with. And I don't think we have to flush away that love story. It's in the soil of what we're continuing to grow. Where I find it most challenging is couples who have come to me post-divorce, who went through a high conflict divorce and are not doing well as co-parents, and they need co-parent counseling. And that work is like renovating a house that was built on a bad foundation with the electrical exposed. It's shocking you all the time, and the basement is flooding out. That's a big job. Whereas if we can get early intervention and prevention with families early on, then we can build that foundation. We put the electrical in the walls safely. We make sure that this two-home life that you're going to be sharing with each other is built intentionally and thoughtfully from the ground up.
Right. How do these families find someone who can coach them through that? I mean, as a divorce coach yourself, how do they find a divorce coach? Like you said, you didn't even know it existed at the time you got into it. So what would you encourage people to do as they're going through the process of divorce? Maybe they find that the other side is extremely litigious, but they're on the collaborative side and wanting to make things work. What would you suggest to those individuals on finding the right person to help them through that?
Well, I think we are in a renaissance of divorce happening right now as we speak here in 2025. There are people looking for new options, and divorce coaching, I think training here in the States probably began in the early 2000s and has slowly been growing. And now there's a lot of opportunities for training, which means there's a lot more of us out there. And I really see myself in a consulting role. I've been consulting to businesses for so long. And that means, what do we need today? We need a financial advisor. We will need a lawyer. We're going to just right size their role so they're not supersized. And within your own arena, I'm a CDC certified divorce coach. We have a directory online where people can see within their state other coaches that have graduated and bring that certification. There's a lot of lawyers who are coming to coaching and mediation because they are so tired of being in family court, making, these terrible conflict situations for families. So a good Google search on divorce coaching. Even just recently, the New York Times this last weekend, there was a story and the headline was, "Getting divorced? There's a coach for that." Wow. And one of my cohorts from my training class was highlighted in that article. So folks like me, I have a book coming out in a year in May of 2026, My Good Enough Divorce, which is part memoir and part also helping other families see how they can do it. There's a number of other authors and individuals who are really broadcasting. Folks like you, Michael, and my own podcast. You throw a rock anywhere, you can probably find a divorce podcast. So there is getting to be more options. And a simple Google search, and anyone can find me at thegooddivorcecoach.com and my podcast. And there are other wonderful professionals there. It is unique, my approach, because I work with both individuals. It's more common that coaches work with one person in the party and support them in their preparation, support them with their emotional transformation. I just have found that the best results come when you carry both individuals side by side and they're in an integrated process.
Yeah, we found that true in therapy too. That's why there's a whole systems approach to family therapy, which is a very unique way to approach working with families. You help change the system, you can change the dynamics, right? And so when one person is making a change, the other person may not understand how to respond to it or such. I think a lot of times when we're counseling people are so terrified of the agenda of the other side. They're terrified of it's like a breakdown of trust, right? People have broken, the trust is broken, the marriage has failed. And so the trust is out the window. And they have to develop a new normal, which is in this ability that I have found to create what we call parental trust. And so they're trusting each other as parents, as you complimented your husband, Michael, and mentioned that, he is a phenomenal father and you've developed that with him. Maybe he wasn't the right husband, but he was a phenomenal father to the children and finding a way to get there. And I think people are just trying to understand how to navigate that process. Earlier, you mentioned you could throw a rock and find a divorce, whether it's a podcast, a book, an article, something, because it's such a big deal now. What I'm wondering is, how do you know when people have found the right information? If there's so much information on this, what would you encourage our listeners to do and say, when you're wanting to find the right information, this is how I would go about doing that?
Well, I might adjust my advice about fit. It's information, but it's also about the right fit. And you're a therapist, and I'm whenever I'm referring people out to therapists, I'm like, you got to meet at least two. It's like going shopping for shoes. You say, could I try the 8 and the 8.5? Yes. And you put those suckers on and you walk around the store and then you put the other one on. And then when you have a right fit. And if we give that much attention to the feet, with the shoes that are going to go on our feet, we should give that much attention to the people that we're inviting into our very personal, precious life.
Yep.
Let's find right fit. And so you might not know the specificity of what you're looking for at the starting gate, but as you meet people, as you interview them, and that is everything from attorneys to coaches, to therapists, to certified divorce financial analysts, that sometimes you don't know until you talk to two people and you're like, oh, that's this approach. Oh, that's where they go. Oh, that did not vibe with me. Oh, they don't know this other person told me 10 things that I'd made. That resonates with me. So find the individuals on your team that align with your values and your gut check. We should not underestimate the wisdom of our intuition.
I love it. It sounds like you're saying take the time to interview them versus the other way before you invite them into your intimate part of your life to ensure that it's a good fit for you and your family situation.
Beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, I love that because we're not putting people in boxes, are we, Karen? We're not, I've worked with families and a lot of what they experience is similar, but all of them are responding to it very differently because of their own stuff, right? And so that's one of the beauties of therapy, and that's why it's an art form, in my opinion. There's science behind it, but it's an art form. And so hearing you say that, I think it's wonderful to give people permission to say, hey, find what you're looking for and make sure it fits for you, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of idea. So
that's right.
It's almost like finding a fitted hat, right? You got to try on a couple, make sure it fits the head. Exactly. What other things, Karen, have you found that if people just did this part well, this would actually help navigate, right, that journey through the divorce and having a good divorce, as we call it? What would you say is like, keep this in mind as you're going through it? This will be a huge benefit to you in the long run. What would you suggest what would that look like or be?
Immediately what comes to mind is this idea of how we begin is often how we end.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Talk about the beginning, which often is a big communications plan. And again, when I put on my consulting hat, I tell my clients, I'm going to be your communications director, your project manager, sometimes your referee, your facilitator, your river guide when we're in class 5 rapids, knowing when we need to eddy out and take a pause.
Right.
So recognizing one of the very first things people come with are like, we don't know what to do next and we need to tell our kids. How do we tell our kids?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a family come to me. They'd made the decision. We engaged in our work. And again, the first thing was like, we have to tell our kids this weekend. What do we say to them? And I said, well, that's actually not the first thing. There's a whole bunch of little micro actions. Because as soon as you sit down to talk to your children, the big question they're going to have is, am I moving? Where will Santa find me? Do I need 2 toothbrushes? Are we leaving this house? Will I go to the same school? Will I see my best friend next door? Right? They're not thinking about asset division. They're thinking about home. And usually parents don't have answers to those questions yet before they sit down with their kids. So then we leave our children with a bunch of questions unanswered and ambiguity, which creates anxiety for children. And we don't have to know everything, but we need to be prepared for those tough questions and probably tap the brakes and get a few answers first for ourselves before we have that conversation with our kids. And, so often there's also a circle of support around those children. And I recommend that we do that communication plan first. We're going to talk to teachers and coaches, whether that's an email, babysitters, nannies, grandparents, our own circle of support, our adult friends. Let's get everyone prepared and ready to hold these children. And so Michael and I, we went and sat with our son's preschool teacher and our daughter's second grade teacher. We said, we need to have a meeting. And they were all like, whoa, what's going on? They didn't see this coming. Like, nope, parents don't ever do this. And I said, I don't know why not. Because if the damn dog had died over the weekend, you'd be getting an email. Hey, Johnny might be a little emotional this week because we lost the pet, let alone a grandparent, right? Huge shift in the family, very significant. But again, because there's so much shame and isolation that wraps around the topic of divorce, we tend to stuff it and withhold it. We need to educate our circle of support and the community around us about how we're going to do this and how you can support us. So we send messages out to all those folks. I just wrote a press release with a couple to their friends. They had 30 people. They're like, we don't think we can do 30 conversations about this. I said, well, you could do one. You can write your own headline and stay ahead of the press, which is that rumor mill. They're like, we want to hold our story. So they sent a message, both of them together, to 30 of their mutual friends. We are so sorry to let you know that we have come to this difficult decision. Rest assured, it did not happen overnight. When you see us, don't ask why. Just ask us how we're doing. You don't need to take sides. The only side we're on is the side of our children, right? So we set the stage. And then those parents so often get all these immediate loving messages like, oh, thank you. That's so classy and it's graceful and it's elegant and we're here for you. And they immediately know what their role is.
Wow.
And for the parents who are like, we can't be deceptive. We can't keep lying to our kids if we're back here planning a divorce. I'm like, you've been lying to your kids and pretending probably for years, certainly for months. You can pretend a little bit longer until you got your poop in a group and you can sit down and you know what day you're talking to your kids, what time of day, what's the moment before that conversation, what's the moment after that conversation. I like to set people up where there's a weekend without a birthday party or a soccer tournament. So that kids have to process. It's not just the words. And that's the kind of coaching I've been giving to executives when they're leading change management in their businesses for the last 25 years.
Right.
And I think the big mistakes we make is we don't tell people what's not changing. We only tell them what is changing. And with kids, there's so much value in emphasizing, we're still your parent team. That's not changing. Santa is still absolutely going to know where to find you. That's not changing. We love both of you. We as your grown-up parents, we're going to take care of all the things we've always taken care of. You don't have to worry about that. You need 2 toothbrushes? We're going to get you 2 toothbrushes. In fact, let's go shop. You can get a Flintstone one here. And, kids these days won't even know who the Flintstones are, right? So really I'm training those parents so that launch pad for them. And then we do family before finances.
Right.
And we work on, now it's a mindful process of how people are moving out. Are we keeping the family home? Are we both moving? Is one person moving? How are the parents involved? How do we post a schedule? What's our first transition schedule? How do we keep track of the mittens and the hockey gear? Right? There's so much skill building. When you live across 2 homes, it's complicated.
Correct.
And very little to just train people. I mean, we're launching kids to college and you can get a coach to figure out how to apply for college, follow all the deadlines, how to write the resume, how to highlight right? We're teaching people how to get into college, please let us teach you how to move through divorce and have a high functioning, joyful family experience on the other side of
Yeah.
divorce.
It can feel
It's
very,
not
when people go through divorce, you're right, Karen. It can feel very lonely, scary. There's a lot and I think parents forget that they're going through their own transitions and the kids will sense that off of them. And the kid wants to protect the parent through that process as much as they can because they need
Yes.
that parent to be stable for them, and it's really sad to see when kids have to carry that burden and not wanting to, but having to in situations. Family system is making a great adjustment. I'm wondering with divorce coaches, do divorce coaches usually get brought into a divorce kind of before the fire starts burning? Or is it like when everything's up in flames? When is a person, we call the fire department, right? When the flames are going.
Yes.
And, we try to put them out ourselves first, but when is a person using a divorce coach? Is it like when the flames start or is the thing already burning?
Well, ideally, it's at the beginning, going back to that idea of how we begin is often how we end.
Right.
And finding the support before the lawyer. I'll work with couples 2 to 3 months before we call in a lawyer.
Wow.
And we work on the parenting plan. We write all that parenting plan before we start talking about the division of assets, because the money triggers that part of our brain, that
Yep.
limbic part around scarcity and fear. But when we're talking about kids, we want the abundance executive function on board, right? Like we're talking about what are curfews going to be, and how are we going to handle chores and allowance across 2 homes? Let's talk about that before we're in it. It's not going to be identical, but we're trying to reduce future conflict. And my hope is that coaching, support, mediation is where people begin. And we insert lawyers for the legal component to do the legal writing. Getting married is a legal document. Getting divorced is a legal document. But again, lawyers are wired differently, and they're risk adverse. So they're looking down one set of lens. So bringing coaches in, and certainly there are some law firms around the country now who have coaches embedded in their law firm.
Tell me about that.
Those services,
Right.
so that you've got somebody helping you to get prepared. What are the questions you may ask your lawyer?
Right. Right. This idea of hiring. So you're saying that there's firms hiring coaches that come in and actually help the individual before they hire the attorney, or is this during the process? Like what
they
is
would
that?
they would work with them throughout the process, but I know there's firms who have coaches on salary in. Right, we have an accountant, and we've got 4 lawyers, and we've got our receptionist and our admin and our paralegal and our divorce coach. Right,
Wow.
it's another employee on the team.
Wow.
And when people are arriving, and that coach gives you an opportunity to do some of the emotional work. I mean, I like everyone to have a Michael like you in their life, a therapist who is working through their journey. Because as you said, it's not just the kids. There is an enormous grief process.
Yes.
And reorientation of self. I've often said if my husband had actually died, people would know what to do with that. There would have been a meal train. I would have had a casserole in my freezer every other week. People would have been making sure that I was invited to dinners. Do you need a walk? What do you need? How can we support you? But my husband didn't die. My marriage died. My identity as a wife and a partner died. My full-time role as a parent died. And oftentimes our identity within our circle of support and friends. Like there's so many layers of death and grief.
Yes.
And that is what's happening internally, but we give people a math problem about dividing assets. We've already got a conflict, a cerebral conflict. So providing that processing support is so essential to success.
100%. I have found that people that have identified only as a parent, like their whole identity is wrapped in being a parent, struggle the most in the divorce because of what you just mentioned about how all their roles are changing. And they grasp on in a way that can become very unhealthy in some ways. I think unintentionally. I think a lot of the problems that we see in family systems usually start unintentional. And they become intentional at times because that seems to be the litigious place, is showing the intent of the other, right, to continue to pull, as you say, pulling apart rather than learning the collaboration of coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would love to ask you, Karen, there was something on here I wanted to ask you about. Are there other common mistakes that you see that unintentionally are creating distance between the children and maybe one of their parents?
Well, when children become a commodity and parents are in sort of a possessive land grab spirit, that's problematic. And here's the echo part of that. So I give my child a Christmas present. They love it. They're so excited about it. They want to play with it every day. They go to pack it up and take it over to their other home. And I say, oh, no. That stays here.
Right.
That is problematic for a child. If you cannot give your child a gift that is theirs to determine. And I'm not talking about a big screen TV that's attached to the wall or the new computer system or, your banana chair for your bedroom, but being sensible about allowing there to be a swinging door between their homes or a bridge, not a moat and a drawbridge and some crocodiles. And so parents doing the work of Catherine Woodward Thomas and conscious uncoupling is incredibly beneficial for couples so that they can pull apart their intimate romantic marriage relationship without burning down the thing that still needs to exist, which is we're co-parents.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, again, we're feeding into what has been a longstanding narrative that person is your enemy. Just a moment ago, you were falling head over heels, having a marriage celebration, having an intimate life, making these babies who were made through love. And now we're supposed to flip the story. So staying too long and entering into this process when you're already in high conflict.
Right.
And what can happen a lot of times for those of us who are not conflict driven, and we're kind of like, nobody's beating each other and no one's being financially, infidelity and all the things. And so people stay and they start kind of unconsciously creating habits and behaviors. Addictions start to show up, affairs begin to show up. We get more angry. We're making the case every day that this thing doesn't work. And as a result, that's escalating hurt and damage and pain before we even arrive at the door of divorce. Whereas most of us drive by the exit ramp several times and we just keep going around. Whereas if we could see it and we had some language and support so we could make an elegant exit, which isn't to say a good divorce doesn't mean it feels good. They're terrible. It is a unbelievably challenging, painful, dark experience for most of us. But if we can come through it and not hold on to that, right? It really is Phoenix rising. Then we get to reestablish a new relationship with our former spouse, which can be friendly. You might not be friends, but you absolutely can and should, in my opinion, try to be friendly. Now, there's outlier cases where we do have domestic violence, where we do have financial infidelity, where this is not for every case and every individual.
Right.
But I think there's a vast majority of us who are just looking for a path to get unmarried without a dumpster fire.
I feel like most of the families I've worked with would actually say that's what they hoped for. And I always find it interesting when I ask people that have been litigating for years is, are y'all ready to be done? It's always the same answer. It's but what does done look like? They may have different definitions, but in the end, I've never had parents say, I don't want a relationship with my kids. I've had parents come in and say, I'm done fighting for a relationship.
Yes.
But they don't ever say they don't want one. And so everyone's kind of hoping and wanting the same things. They just have struggle navigating how to get there is what I have found. And so it almost becomes, it's kind of a weird word to use, but there's a negotiable place in there where both people want to feel validated and kind of talk through that. And I love how you mentioned today the elegant exit. I took note of that. And I think that's a wonderful way to describe walking out of something into the new way, right? Like it's a new normal is the word we actually use at Brighter Possibilities, is wanting to create a new normal. And so doing that is just super important. Karen, how does our audience find you? How do they connect with you directly? What would be the best way to do that?
They can go right to my website,
Uh-huh.
KarenMcNenny.com. But the easier thing to remember is the Good Divorce Coach. That'll, those words together, which we don't hear often, you will find me. And there is a button on my website that just says Connect with Karen. And every hour, the first hour is always free with me. So if you're
Wow.
listening and you just want to explore this more,
Yes.
just because we talk about divorce doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right.
And maybe you're listening and you're like, oh, this sounds amazing. My spouse will never go for it. Call me. We'll talk. We'll
Yes.
all explain the process and what you might need to know. And I might never talk to you again, but I might also say, hey, here are 5 sentences to use with your spouse so that they just get on the phone with me. And a lot of times then that second spouse, because again, we're educating and they're like, oh, we could do, oh, this is an option. Oh, sign me up. And it might be, I'll talk to you over that time. I'll give you some specific support around your story and your situation, and we may never talk again.
Wow.
So feel free to reach out. And by all means, also find not only like this fabulous podcast, but the Good Divorce Show. And I have an interesting combo of guests. I have folks like Michael, who's a guest on my show, and other experts and lawyers and real estate people and financial folks. But I also have 50% of my clients that are adult children of divorce, couples, individuals who have walked the walk and come with a smile to talk about their divorce. And sometimes, because if we don't know what it looks or sounds like, it's really hard to imagine. And I think storytelling, and that's why I started the show, was just to interview people, not experts. But you all wiggled your way in. So now I got a good combo of
Well, we're glad to be part of that with you. So that's wonderful.
So find the Good Divorce Show for some hope and inspiration.
I think that's wonderful, Karen. I'm so glad that you decided to do that. I mean, we could have never had you had COVID not happened. This is one of the beauties of COVID, one of the horrible things that we've all had to go through and the changes. But you found a way to navigate it and get to a place where you're serving others in a capacity that is so needed. Families are so much benefited by what you're offering and what you're doing. And I would love to say also another question I was going to ask you is, you're available to serve anyone across any capacity, whether from another country, in our states. It doesn't matter. I don't think there's any lines to coaching, is there?
Coaching, consulting, even our financial advisors, they can work across state lines. It's lawyers who have to be designated in their state bar. And so lawyers have to be connected. So when I work with folks outside of Montana, which is a lot of my clients, I have a growing list of folks, lawyers who are right on board with the Good Divorce experience and partner alongside me and other financial advisors.
Well, that's great because a lot of our listeners, we have listeners all over outside the country as well on the show, but a lot of them are in Texas. You know, that's where we're located. A lot of listeners have started there. And so to know that they can reach out and seek out your services is just wonderful. Karen, is there any final thoughts you would love to share with our listeners that you think would be extremely helpful for them as they navigate this process of divorce?
In the midst of my divorce, it was a couple of years down the road, and it takes a while to resettle. And a friend sent a card. She knew I was just struggling. I had moved out of the family home. I was reestablishing my financial world, my business world. And inside that card was this quote: "Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end."
Oh, wow. Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
That's right.
No.
And it went on my refrigerator and it stayed there for years. And I share it at the end of every one of my podcast episodes as a reminder that where you stand today, like a river, it's temporary. It's not permanent. And I'm sure you share that with your clients as well. This dark, difficult place that you think you will never come out the other side of. You will. I promise. I actually want to make that promise. Keep your paddle in the water and keep going down the river. You will come through it.
Well, I want to thank you, Karen, for that. And I will go ahead and give our sign off here just a second. For those of you listening, our listeners, I want to thank you so much for being here to hear wonderful Karen talking about so much wonderful information. She's also mentioned how she can find you. We will add some things in our show notes so that you have a way to connect with her directly, get to know a little bit more about who she is, as well as Karen, we can't thank you enough for being here. And I just want to say to you all who are listening, thank you again and keep moving forward, everyone. Have a wonderful day.